officially been closed for a week now. I know it's a worrying time for everyone from a health point of view, but also from a business point of view. So myself, Laura Husband from Hairdressers Journal International, and Eve Oxbury, editor of Professional Beauty, are here with the National Hairdressers and Beauty Federation. And I'll pass you over to Eve, who's going to introduce who we've got with us today.
Good morning, everybody. So yeah, this is a joint session between Professional Beauty and Hairdressers Journal, because we know that for salons across both sectors, it's a really difficult time. So we've got Hilary Hall, who is Chief Executive of the NHBF, and also Tina Beaumont-Goddard, who is Membership Director. And they're both quite expert in this, in giving you a bit of advice on what's out there in terms of support from the government, and in terms of kind of looking after your employees, but also if you're self-employed, what resources there are and what access to funding you can get. So I'm going to hand over now to Hilary and Tina. I think Hilary's probably going to start, is that right? And just give us a little bit of info about what's out there. Sorry, just to let you know, Hilary and Tina will both speak, and then afterwards there'll be a chance to ask any questions that you have, and we'll do a bit of a Q&A afterwards. So thanks so much for joining us, Hilary. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, and good to sort of meet you online. So we're going to do a roundup of the business support that's available for salons, focusing particularly on the finance and the things that we've had lots of questions about. So business rates will be a large part of that. I'm also going to talk about the self-employment income support scheme, and then I'm going to hand over to Tina to talk about the coronavirus job retention scheme and a few other FAQs that come up all the time. This is quite detailed information, so I'm going to go through it as slowly as I can. We do have a hub on the NHBF website, so if you go onto our main site, you can't miss it. The coronavirus hub is very prominent. Because information comes out so quickly and it keeps changing as we get more details, because believe me, we're asking questions all the time. The blog is updated pretty well every day, so keep looking at it, because if the answer to your question isn't there now, it may well be tomorrow. So starting with business rates, the first thing is that all retail, hospitality and leisure businesses won't have to pay business rates for this coming year. Now, the key question, there's been loads of questions about this, is what does retail mean? And the good news is it does cover hair salons, beauty salons and barbershops. So whenever they're talking about retail, you guys are covered. There are two different schemes, and what I'm talking about now applies to England. It is slightly different in both Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. So again, have a look on our hub, because we've got specific information about the other nations. The schemes are similar in Scotland and Wales. They're a bit less generous in Northern Ireland, but the information is there. So what I'm talking about now applies to England. So there's basically two cash grants that you can get. The first one is a retail, hospitality and leisure business grant. So this is why the retail is important. Because if you've got a rateable value between £15,000 and £51,000, you will be eligible for a cash grant of £25,000. Now, if your rateable value is less than £15,000, you'll get a cash grant of £10,000. Now, a lot of salon owners don't pay business rates at all because they already qualify for the Small Business Rates Relief Scheme. So if you are eligible for that relief and receiving it already, you will be eligible also for a cash grant of £10,000. So as I say, check out the different local authorities. You don't need to contact your local authority, they will contact you. And we have had quite a lot of members reporting back to us that local authorities are giving different advice. We've had some saying, well, beauty is part of retail, but hair isn't. So on our website, there are links to the actual information, the official information that tells local authorities which businesses qualify. So it's definitely worth having a look, because if you're not getting the grants you're entitled to, it's worth pushing back. Just a quick word about rents and mortgages. No business will be forced out of their premises if they miss a rental payment due to coronavirus, and that's for the next 3 months. Likewise, mortgage holidays, there are 3-month mortgage holidays available to people in financial difficulties due to the coronavirus. There are also business interruption loans, and these are available from banks. They'll be interest-free for 12 months, but remember these are a loan, so like any loan, you will have to pay it back at some point. Some feedback we're getting from members is that quite a lot of banks have been very slow to set these up. And just be careful if a bank is offering you a loan that it is the coronavirus business interruption loan and not some other deal that means you would be paying interest. On our blog, we've got a link that takes you to the business interruption loan scheme information. And on there are 40 lenders that are approved for the scheme. So have a look at that and just make sure you're contacting a lender that knows about the scheme and how it operates. A quick word about VAT. Your next quarter's VAT payment will be delayed until June 2020. And you have until the end of the financial year, so that's April next year, April 2021, to pay your VAT bill in full. So I'm going to move on now to the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme. This is the one that was announced last Thursday. And like any government announcement, you know, the announcement comes out and you get all the headline information. And with everything, the devil's in the details. So we get lots and lots of questions. We then feed them back and keep asking questions. So there are some gaps in this information, which we're filling as quickly as we can. So first of all, what is it? It's a taxable grant of 80% of the average monthly profits, and it's profits, not earnings, over the last 3 years, based on the last 3 years' tax returns that you filed. So the maximum payable is £2,500 per month. So that's the same as the maximum that a furloughed employee will get, and Tina's going to talk about that later. The scheme's for 3 months. Then it's going to be reviewed and it may be extended depending on how long coronavirus continues. So who can apply? You must have filed a tax return for 2018-19. So those are the tax returns that would have been due at the end of January this year. And the government has said if you haven't yet filed your tax return, then you've got another 4 weeks to do that. So that will take you to somewhere around the 23rd of April. So if you haven't done your tax return, make sure it's in now because there is an extension for it. Another question we've been asked a lot is, well, what happens if you haven't got 3 years of tax returns? The government has said the grant will be based on however many tax returns you've got. They said that the reason they go for 3 years is so that they can work out an accurate average. Particularly with new businesses, income can go up and down quite dramatically in a short period. But if you haven't got 3 years worth of tax returns, as long as you've got that one in for last year, then you can claim on the tax returns that you have put in. You must have a trading profit of at least less than £50,000. And you must make most of your income from being self-employed. Now, if you pay yourself a salary and dividends through your company, you're not covered by the scheme. And unfortunately, this applies to many salon owners. The government advice is that you'll be covered for your salary by the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme if you operate PAYE. Now, we're trying to get information about what happens if you don't operate PAYE, and at the moment there's a gap in that information. As soon as we've got it, it will be up on our blog. So how will it work? HMRC, when the announcement was made, it was said that HMRC expecting there to be a delay until June. That's how long it's going to take them to set up new systems to process the grants. And I know that's a really worrying time for self-employed people at the moment who are already badly stretched for money. But they have said that HMRC will contact self-employed people who've filled in returns. Obviously, they know who you are because you've submitted a tax return, and they'll ask you to complete an online form, and then payment for all 3 months will be made into your bank accounts in a single lump sum. So a lot of people will be saying, well, what if I can't wait till June? So there's two options. One, you can take out a business interruption loan, the one that's interest-free for 12 months. That was the one I was talking about earlier. Just bear in mind that it is a loan and you will have to pay that back. You can also apply for universal credit. You'd get the same rate as statutory sick pay for employees, but the minimum income floor has been suspended. So you should be able to claim universal credit at a similar rate to someone who is unemployed. The government has also said that advance payments can be made for universal credit. Normally there's quite a long lead-in time, as much as 5 weeks, but they are saying advance payments can be made, their words, within days. So those are the two big areas that we get asked a lot of questions about the financial support, particularly business rates, and about the self-employed income support scheme. The other area that we're getting asked a lot about is on the coronavirus job protection scheme. So I'm going to hand over to Tina now and let her explain to you what that's all about.
Thanks, Hilary. Good morning, everyone. So what is the coronavirus job protection scheme that we've all heard so much about, and how does it work? This is a temporary scheme that has been introduced by the government to provide support to employers so they can continue to pay wages to their employees who would normally have otherwise been laid off without pay because of the coronavirus outbreak. These staff will be classed as furloughed workers. To access the scheme, employers will need to designate their staff as furloughed workers. You'll hear the word furloughed quite a bit, and I'll come across them, give you a bit more information about that one shortly. So there are procedures and discussions that you should have with your team before furloughing them. I will cover how to furlough your staff shortly, but I'd like to give you a little bit more information on the scheme itself. Bear in mind what Hilary's already just mentioned a few minutes ago, is that the government are updating their guidelines all the time. There's likely to be tweaks, there's more information coming out on this, so some of the questions we may not be answered straight away, but we'll keep the blog updated on our website. So to access the scheme, employers will need to designate their staff as a furloughed worker. There are procedures and discussions that you should have had with your team already before furloughing them. So once you've designated your team as a furloughed worker, you can then apply for the grant from HMRC, which will cover 80% of an employee's gross regular wage, that's gross regular wage, or £2,500 per month, so whichever is the lower. You will also be able to claim the associated employer national insurance contributions and the minimum employer pension contributions. These are the normal contributions that any employer would make, so you still have to continue paying those, and therefore you'll be able to claim those back as well. So the scheme will be open for at least 3 months and is backdated to the 1st of March 2020. And as Hilary mentioned, the government are likely to keep an eye on this one as things move on. So employers can decide whether or not they wish to top up the remaining 20%, but they do not have to. Employees covered under the job retention scheme, Hilary's already covered the self-employed. This job retention scheme is for full-time employees, part-time employees, employees on agency contracts, and employees on flexible and 0-hour contracts, flexible or 0-hour contracts. So it is expected that the scheme will be up and running by the end of April, so a few weeks to go before that comes out. But employers will then be able to claim the financial support available via the online portal, which many salons already have set up anyway. And members have been asking, what if I can't afford to pay my staff before the scheme is up and running? So that's quite a frequent question, because obviously the employees are wanting their money now, but the salon has probably only had a couple of weeks trading in March, possibly can't afford to pay the 4 months' wages. So there's some advice on this one. So the legal team's advice is to furlough your staff even if you can't afford to pay them now. You should explain the scheme to your staff and say that you will be applying for the financial help to pay their wages at 80%. And I'll give you some more information on that one as well, as it's all part of the furlough process. But don't forget, if your business needs a short-term cash flow support before the scheme kicks in, you'll be eligible, may be eligible for the coronavirus business interruption loan, which again, Hilary has already mentioned. If any of your employees say they do not want to be furloughed because they can't wait for the money, then we would suggest again that you seek legal advice for that. it's unlikely that following the discussion with them that they may prefer to be furloughed, or it's more likely that they would prefer to be furloughed than take the chance of the alternative, which is being made redundant, which is actually the last resort you need to follow. So the legal team would advise that redundancy should not be taken as a first resort. It should be your last resort. As part of the redundancy process is that you must always consider alternatives. And in this case, the alternative is the job retention scheme. So here's some other points to note as well. You cannot claim for national insurance or pension contributions on any amounts that you decide to pay over the 80% provided. So if you were to top up to the 100%, then you can't claim back any of that 100% or the contributions that are related to it. So whilst on furlough, your employees' wages will be subject to they'll be paying their national insurance and pension contributions as well, based on their qualifying earnings, unless they've already opted out of the pension scheme. So a bit more about furloughing your staff. To participate in the job retention scheme, as mentioned earlier, you will need to designate affected employees as furloughed. This means that your employees are on leave of absence. The minimum length of an employee can be furloughed is 3 weeks. There is a clear and fair process you need to follow in order to designate an employee as furloughed. The process to be followed is determined by the employee's contract of employment. So some contracts are different to others, depending on how they've been drawn up. So if your employment contract with your employee states that you can lay off staff, now the NHBF contracts do have this clause in them. So if you've got the clause in there that says you can lay off your staff, then you can furlough your team, which means you can do it. You don't have to suggest it to them or ask them the question, you can just do it. But if your employment contracts do not state that you can lay off your staff, you will need their agreement to furlough. So there's a bit more about discussion there. So I would like to stress that the process is different for contracts with and without the layoff clause. The discussion you have and the written communications that follow that discussion do actually differ significantly. Any verbal discussions you have with them must be noted as evidence, as you may need to provide this to HMRC when making your grant application. So keep a record of all your conversations that you have with them and any verbal or written communications as well. Keep a copy of everything. NHBF members have access to a step-by-step guide on how to furlough employees, or they will have very shortly. As I say, the website's being updated all the time. And we also have template letters that you can download, which you can use to document the agreed actions following your discussions. So we'd recommend that you always seek legal advice before starting your discussions with any employer, because if you don't get it right, then you may not be able to claim that 80% further down the line. So now I'm going to run through some questions that our membership team have been asked over the last few weeks. They've been absolutely inundated. I can't cover them all. There's lots and lots covered on our blogs, on the coronavirus, on the website. But here's just a flavour of a few of them. So how are national minimum wage and national living wage affected by the job retention scheme? So the government has confirmed that employees are entitled to the national minimum wage or national living wage when they are working. Furloughed employees are not working, so therefore they're not eligible for the national minimum wage or national living wage during this time. So when your calculations further down the line, when you make those, if it falls below the minimum wage, as I say, that it doesn't apply for those circumstances. So the scheme will make up 80% of the wages for all employees, including those on national minimum wage, national living wage. As I say, it may be less than. So what employment rights do furloughed employees have? Employees who have been furloughed have the same rights as they did when they were working, so their contract doesn't change. So this stays the same for statutory sick pay entitlement, maternity rights, other parental rights, rights against unfair dismissal, and rights to redundancy payments. So all those will carry on as normal. Your employees' leave will continue to accrue whilst they're on furlough. Employees who have taken or are due to take annual leave should be paid their usual holiday pay whilst they're on leave. They can be furloughed when their period of leave comes to an end, but an employee cannot be furloughed and on annual leave at the same time. This all sounds, really confusing, but I say there's more information on our blog just to give you a flavour of the questions that we're getting. it's very likely that employees will actually request to cancel their holidays because they've booked them and nobody's travelling anywhere at the moment. We're not allowed to go anywhere. So they may request to cancel their leave, which you can agree to do. But you need to bear in mind that as an employee, when we all go back to work, then you're going to be inundated with holiday requests. Everybody's going to want a holiday off at the same time. But you'll need to treat that as you would do normally, whether it's on a first come, first served, or put in their holiday request. You can obviously reject those for business reasons. But we have heard recently that there has been some information from the government suggesting that they may relax the rules on carrying over annual leave into the next 2 leave years. But we're just unsure at this time if this applies to all furloughed workers. So again, something to keep an eye on, because nobody's going to be able to get all their leave in the last 6 months of the year. So what about employees on maternity leave or due to take maternity leave? Your employee is eligible for statutory maternity pay, as I've already said, because they're still contracted as an employee, and their maternity allowance as well. So the normal rules will apply, and they're entitled to claim up to 39 weeks of statutory pay or allowance. And in most cases, employers would have already had this money in advance. The smaller employers would have made that request to HMRC already. So that should already be sitting in your pot. So you've had the money to pay them already. So can an employee be made redundant instead of being furloughed? This was covered briefly, but the law says you must explore alternatives to redundancy as part of a fair process. So dismissing employees without attempting to use the job retention scheme or other financial assistance as set out by the government, such as the business interruption loan, it's likely to be regarded as unfair dismissal and could lead to an employment tribunal for a claim. So something they know, it's a really important one there to get some legal advice before making anybody redundant. So what if you've already placed somebody in redundancy? Early days, people shutting the doors quite early, the workload had obviously dropped off, the clients coming through the door had dropped. So some people had already made that decision to make staff redundant or lay them off. So the scheme does cover employees who have already been made redundant since the 28th of February. So provided they're rehired by the employer, they possibly could make that claim. The government have not yet explained exactly how this will work, but again, we suggest you get to seek legal advice or continue to check out our blog. Some of these questions will be answered as we go. So what I've covered today is just a flavour of the common questions that the NHBF membership team have been taking. And again, I'd like to stress that not every case is the same. There's not one answer fits all. And we'd advise that you seek legal advice if you've got anything that you're unsure of. NHBF members can contact the membership team. They're answering the phones, they're picking up emails, and have access to our legal team as well, who will be very, very helpful. Again, just bear in mind that it may take a little while to get through. We've taken thousands of calls over the last 2 weeks. The team are doing a fantastic job, but as I say, just be patient with them. So that's it for me on the job retention scheme. So I believe there's some time for questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tina and Hilary. I think that was really, really useful information for everybody. We've had a couple of questions already, and we've just opened the chat on the YouTube channel where everyone's watching to invite some more questions. So if anyone has any questions, do type them into the YouTube chat and we'll try and put as many as possible to Hilary and Tina in the time we have. So if I can kick off first, we've got a question from Paul, which is about one director companies. So he says, I believe the furlough system is available, but then the company is basically shut down. Is it appropriate to appoint another director unpaid? Oh, Hilary, I think your microphone's off if you're...
Yeah, I'll answer that one. And that is actually quite a complicated question because it's getting right to the heart of the bit that we were saying we're still waiting for information. What Tina has said is that during the furlough period, you can't work, you're not working. And this is another issue for salon owners, that often you are working, you're still answering emails or, you know, looking at stuff on the website, doing social media. So there's a lot of questions around there. And, you know, with regards to appointing another director who isn't paid, that's something we would need to take advice on.
Thank you. Laura, I don't know if are you? Ooh, yeah, you're on.
Yep, I'm going to ask a question actually that I was given ahead of this chat. So basically, If you became self-employed a few months ago, is there any help available for you? If you used to be a fully employed salon member of the team, and then you changed salon and became self-employed 2 or 3 months ago, is there any help available?
Unfortunately, if it's very recent, within the last 3 months, you won't have a tax return filed for the previous year because you've not been trading long enough. So my answer to that would be no, you wouldn't therefore qualify for the support. So that's where the universal credit would come in. Look into the options there.
Thanks, Hilary. We have another question from... Oh, sorry, Laura. We have another question from Ryan King. Who's asked, our salon only opened and started trading on the 4th of March, so we're not yet registered for small business rate relief. Will we still have access to the grant?
That's one that I would say no, because the local authorities are working on the basis of the businesses that do already get the small business rate relief. In that case, it might be worth a call to the local authority, but just be wary because the local authorities are not necessarily yet really clued up on this. But it doesn't look hopeful on that one.
Okay, and then Nick Mesa on YouTube has asked, if you're self-employed but rent a chair and still have to pay chair rental, is there any help for that?
Tina, is that one for you?
It could possibly be. In respect to the chair rental thing, first of all, I'd check the chair renting agreement or the agreement that you have with that landlord. There could possibly be a force majeure section in that agreement, so possibly take some legal advice. It could be that the contract may be suspended for a period of time, so that's one to look out for, definitely. Whether they'd be able to apply for business interruption loan, I'm not quite sure. Hilary may be able to answer that one, which would then tide them over. So say, first of all, I'd say check the agreement that you have with the landlord, if you like, the salon that you're renting that chair from, to see if there is a force majeure in there and get some legal advice on that one. Otherwise, say at the moment, that's not one of the questions that's very clear. We're trying to get some answers on that one, but at the moment, I think it's, you know, the same as if you're renting a premises from any other landlord, is have a discussion with them, see what arrangements you can put in place for when business does get back to normal. Ask for a bit of a rent holiday, but one that you're going to pay back. I would suggest you get everything in writing, not just verbal. But in respect to business interruption loan, I'm not quite sure that Hilary knows the answer to that one.
Yeah, it possibly. It just depends how long you've been renting, you know, what access you can get from the bank. So it's worth a try. But Tina, I think, has given correct advice, and the advice to contact your landlord. You know, presumably it's a salon owner anyway who understands the situation and may be willing to negotiate with you to give you a break.
Thanks, Hilary. Another question we have is, can you clarify if bonuses and commissions can be paid? The advice is confusing as it also mentions averaging out variable pay over a 12-month period.
So are we talking about the job retention scheme here? I'm guessing. It's bonuses and commissions are not included. It's based on their gross pay.
Thank you.
And Davina Darian has asked, if you have an employee on maternity leave, do you still need to send them a FALU letter?
Right, okay, I think that would be one, certainly, that's not one I've come across, so I wouldn't want to give wrong information on that one. I'd suggest that somebody would get some legal advice. Be pretty similar, as I say, their employment contractual rights would still stand, so whilst they're on leave, or maternity leave, obviously they can't have maternity and furlough, there can't be both. So I would suggest that the individual there would seek legal advice on how they stood on that one. But it's a good question, one that we can look at and perhaps add to our FAQs.
Thank you. Our next question is universal credit based on total household income or individual?
I'm afraid I don't think either of us can answer that question. The only information we've got is that you should be able to apply for it, but how universal credit applications work, I don't know. I think you'd be better going to a government source of advice on that one.
Thank you.
This one's quite a good question, actually. So Jeffrey Fitzgerald has said, will there be any help on its way for people who have had a job put on hold due to the coronavirus?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. And the question is will there be any help available for anyone who has had their job put on hold due to the coronavirus? So I'm assuming they've accepted a position that they now can't start.
Quick answer, no. I don't know the answer to that one. I mean, you're not an employee if you haven't started the job. It depends on when your contract started, whether a contract has been signed. That is one definitely to take legal advice on.
Thanks, Hilary. We've got another question about maternity leave here. If an employee is taking 52 weeks maternity and is due back end of April but hasn't yet confirmed she's returning, do you know how a salon owner should deal with that at the moment?
Tina, do you want to take that one?
I will, and again, I don't have the answer. Some of these questions are obviously quite new, ones that we've not come across. Again, I would suggest that you take legal advice. If she's due back in April, she's taken her 52 weeks leave. Then obviously there's not a job for her to come back to. My guess is that you would then put her on furlough if she's going to come back. You can still have that normal discussion if you don't know if she's coming back or not. There's no harm in picking on that telephone, having a conversation with her. But as I say, I would suggest that you seek legal advice on that one before going any further.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think you all know that maternity rights and entitlement is a very complicated area, and it can be quite different from one person to another. So, or take legal advice. You don't want to find you get tripped up later.
Thank you, Hilary and Tina. Sarah Virgo Harris has asked, can you clarify whether the 80% of salary includes any bonuses and commissions, and over what period, and is it an average of 12 months or the employee's last month's salary?
No, it doesn't include bonuses and commissions. It's payable just on gross salary.
But I think, I'll just jump in. Sorry, can I just jump in there really quickly, just to say that we've had a couple of these questions as well, and it is, I think somebody else picked up on it. It is actually quite confusing. It's quite specific that bonuses and commissions are not included, but then it talks about variable pay as well. And I think, there is possibly a clear difference between the two. There may be more information. I think this is a question that's going to come up quite a bit. It may get clarified when you actually come in to make the claim with HMRC. A variable salary normally would mean where somebody is working a different number of hours every week. But as I say, I think it's quite clear at the moment that they are two separate things, but yeah, I think it'll be clarified when the portal's open for claims.
Thanks, Tina. That's really helpful. Our next question is from Tracy, and she's asking, I have 2 members of staff that have been self-employed for 11 months now. So if they submit a tax return now, could they be eligible for 80% of their pay?
I would have thought it's worth a try. Okay, they're not submitting a tax return for a full year. Probably better to speak to an accountant who's more familiar with this than me. But 11 months is quite close to 12 months. What's the worst that can happen? They say no, but if you don't apply for it, you definitely won't get it. So if you've got access to an accountant, ask them first. Otherwise, give it a go.
Brilliant, thank you, Hilary. And someone else has asked, they say they have 2 business premises that have an SBRR on them. Can this person claim the grant for both premises?
Okay, so this is a business that gets the small business rates relief on 2 premises. I would be surprised if you could get both. on the other hand, you are running two businesses. The information that we've had through from England and the nations isn't that specific. It might be worth trying the local authority and asking them. But as I say, just bear in mind that not all local authorities are fully clued up on this yet. We do have a link on our website that goes through to the actual advice that's given to local authorities, and it may be that there's some detail there in the small print, because it is very much tied to the small business rates relief.
Thank you very much, Hilary, for all the questions so far. If anyone else has any more questions, do type them in the chat box on the YouTube feed that you're watching, because we've got a bit more time for questions. I've got one more in the meantime. Amy Gale is asking, she employs one stylist. I know she will be entitled to 80% of her wage, but do I have to pay her and then claim it back, or does she wait? And is it taxed?
Okay, yeah, I can take that one. So yes, it's up really, if the salon is in a financial position to pay her, then then pay. There is always a little bit of a risk there that when you come to make the claim on HMRC, obviously you have to go through some certain eligibility things, some steps there. So they may not be eligible to get that 80% paid back. We don't know what the questions are going to be as to the eligibility, but I would say that if the salon's able to pay, then they can pay, but she doesn't have to. She can wait until the HMRC helpline is open. But what I would say is it's important that she has laid off to get that 80% anyway. She's got to make her furlough, so she'll have to go through the furlough process, look at the contract, look at the layoff procedure, and then see then as to, so at least she's got those steps in place ready to make the claim later on down the line. Otherwise, and the furlough process does discuss and makes the employee aware that they may not actually get paid now, but you're going to make the claim later on down the line. And the answer to the tax is yes, it is tax. So all normal standard employer contributions and pensions are taken from the employee's gross wage.
That's great. Thank you very much, Tina. And Jeffrey Fitzgerald, this is a more general question. And he said, are there any suggestions for where to go for any legal advice?
For NHBF members, legal advice is included in the membership package. So it's 24 hours, 7 days a week. Other than that, you can use a solicitor, or it might be worth trying an accountant body as well. It's quite difficult when you're trying to Google stuff on the website, because lots of law firms are putting information out there. So you can always have a look at some of the online advice that's coming out and contact those companies.
Thank you, Hilary. One more question. Can you clarify the gross pay, as the guarantee and commission totals the gross pay? Is this going on February's payslip or on the year for a furloughed employee?
What the government has said is you cannot claim for fees, commission or bonuses. So that's what they've said. So in terms of what that means, I think that's as clear as we can get it. You can't claim for fees, you can't claim for bonuses, you can't claim for commissions. So I hope that helps.
That's great, thank you for that. I'm currently saying that this whole session has been super helpful, so that's great to know. Just one more question. If there isn't a furloughed employee, are they allowed to do any online training or use social media for their salon while they are furloughed?
This is an interesting one, and the question that we've been asking as well. No, what the government says is that whilst people are furloughed, they can't work. And that immediately raised a question, well, what about apprentices? Because a lot of owners are saying, well, you can practice online, go online, do some learning. And that's raised a question, okay, if they're training at home and therefore working, they can't then be furloughed. Tina, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think I'd say exactly the same. Whilst somebody's a furlough, they can't work for and sort of gain for the business. As I say, it's quite confusing, but as far as we're concerned, any training hours undertaken would have to be paid, certainly at national minimum wage as well. So then that gets a little bit confusing when you can only claim 80% of the wages, so what hours are training and which hours are not. So I think we'll be waiting for more information on that one. Obviously, most of it will be virtual training. But yes, I think it's let's watch this space, I think.
Thank you. I think we've got just one more question at the moment from Gavin. I have an under 16-year-old Saturday girl. Can I claim anything for her?
I would say that's probably a tricky one, because an under 16-year-old Saturday girl isn't necessarily, if she's on through the PAYE, I mean, you can only claim for anybody that sits on your payroll by a PAYE. She may not do. So that one will probably be for HMRC with the portal. Suggest again that you perhaps get a little bit of legal advice on that one, as to whether you're actually going to furlough somebody. But to be furloughed, they have to be on an employment contract, and I'm not sure that a 16-year-old Saturday girl would necessarily be on one. So there's a few questions there rolled into one. So I can't really give you a definite answer on that one.
Thank you very much, Tina. I think we probably need to wrap up now because we're running close to time. So thank you so much to Hilary and Tina. I think that the comments that we've been getting on the YouTube channel is this has been so helpful to people for their businesses. I think there are so many questions out there. So people really appreciate your guidance on this. And I know for some of them it's quite difficult to answer, and we don't want to give people the wrong advice. So I think definitely kind of keeping an eye on the government website and on the NHBF website as well, and on the blogs is really great direction too. But thank you so much for all your knowledge on this subject.
Oh, and just before we go, we just want to let everyone who's watching know that you can claim CPD hours at the end. VTCT are awarding 1 hour for every webinar attended this week. So we'll be typing in the links that you can go to on the PB website and the HJ website to make sure that you can claim this back as part of CPD. And also, Hilary and Tina, is there any specific places on your website that we should be encouraging people to go to for more information?
To be honest, when you go onto our website, coronavirus is really prominent. There's two areas that are particularly helpful. There's a blog and there's also an FAQ section. The FAQ section covers a lot of the things that we've talked about now. And there's also, from that page, there's a link to a section about the job retention scheme that Tina went through. So you really can't miss it. There's tons of information on there, and it's available not only to members but to non-members as well, and it's all completely free.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Hilary. So just also to remind everybody that Virtual Beauty Week goes on until Friday, and as well as some fantastic webinars, we've got some really good offers from suppliers and brands that we're going to be at the Professional Beauty Show. So do have a look on the websites, both HJ and Professional Beauty. If you go to Professional Beauty, there's a Virtual Beauty Week tab right at the top. And on that page you can click through to see special offers from brands and also lots of prizes through competitions this week. So there's lots going on in addition to all the webinars.
Fantastic. And
but yeah, I think that this is us now. So thanks so much again for all your help. Oh, sorry, Laura, you go.
I was just going to say, on the HJ website, you can click through to HJ's Virtual Week through our carousel, so you can't miss it there either. So enjoy the week, and we hope this has been useful for you. And thank you so much to Hilary and Tina.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.